What if your business ideas could uplift others and become your legacy? Good morning. I'd like to welcome Shea Gerhardt to the Designing Your Legacy podcast. And she is the founder and CEO of Buderflys Technology. Prior to Buderflys, though, she spent nearly 2 decades in executive roles in the mobile, gaming, and music industries, having worked with major music labels, including Universal, Sony, EMI, and Warner Brothers, as well as some of the world's largest mobile wireless companies, including AT&T, Sprint, VZW, T-Mobile, and Vodafone. She built a career on the ability to develop a clear and focused path to cutting through the noise in crowded and stale industries and growing a business where user-centric products become king. Welcome, Shea.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. And you're joining us today from Denver, Colorado?
Yes, we're in Colorado.
Yes. So I was curious to begin with, how did this creative idea come about? What's the backstory? Let's start here.
So I would say I'm creative in an entrepreneurial sense, right? Like I think there's creativity and people who are brilliantly good at creating design and art. My sort of superpower is creating business, creative ideas in business, and how we go to market and all the different features and really identifying what the consumer needs the most. And so that's where my creativity comes. I mean, like most entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial minded people, I have a whole list of potential market ideas that have a lot of strong business case against them. But this one actually came about because I was in, as you mentioned earlier, I was in the music industry and gaming space, but recently in the DJ space. So that is where sound is really important. And
I just want to intrude for a second. So here I am with my Apple earbuds, and I never even knew that your invention existed, but it wasn't your first invention.
Yeah, well, it's the first one I've actually come to market with. Weren't worth it, but I was in the space, and so I sort of knew that the space. I knew the headphone space, but because we're in Colorado, I was going skiing one day. We have 3 little kids, and my husband's like, "Go skiing by yourself tomorrow. Enjoy your day." We love powder days, so lots of snow. And I couldn't fall asleep that night, so I fell asleep with the wired Apple AirPods that you're wearing right now, and woke up with a crazy aching pain in my ears. And prior to this, like, I've listened to a ton of audiobooks and podcasts. I love them. I was probably like the first to be on Audible. I was one of the first to start listening to podcasts, because that feeling you get when you get to feed your curiosity and your mind, and it's like having mentors all around the world for me, right? And like, I particularly love history, and having all these incredible authors like essentially speaking to me, and so I can learn business history mostly, but I can learn from those experiences and so forth. But I would talk to my friends and be like, "Hey, you should listen to this podcast or this audiobook," and they would always be like, "I can't wear earbuds that long. It hurts. They fall out all the time. They're such a pain. I can't wear them." I didn't actually have that problem until this night. So that morning, it's called a plastic clamshell design that they're designed. All earbuds in the market were designed 14 years ago with that AirPod that came free, the wired AirPods that came free with your device. But they're all made with a plastic clamshell design. And so I split open the seam on those, took out the components, put it in my kids' swimmer's wax, and comfortably wore them all day skiing, and underneath my helmet, and the sound environment was so much cleaner than, those aren't great. They don't have great speaker systems in them, but the sound was so much cleaner. It was so comfortable, even after having aching ears. And so I came in the next day to my CFO and I was like, "Hey, listen to what I invented." He's like, "No, that has to exist." And we spent a really long time vetting it. Then we spent a really long time determining both quantitative and qualitative research, determining whether or not this was not just a problem with all my friends, but an actual industry problem. And it turns out
I just want to interrupt for 1 second. So the creativity came from almost like the story of like your personal story, like it created pain for you. You're trying to sleep, and
yes,
yeah, it was personal. Okay, go ahead.
And so, but it is actually the number one complaint in the industry for consumers. They can't wear earbuds. Most of them who are heavy earbud users can't use them more than 35 minutes without that achy feeling. And that happens for a number of reasons. One is your ear is constantly moving when you talk and chew and exercise. And that constant movement against that hard plastic design, even the rubber or foam ear tips that is sort of the current industry solution, it's like a plastic bag over something hard, right? Like it doesn't really do anything for comfort. And it hasn't changed, it being the number one complaint. So that constant friction against that of your ear moving against that hard design is what causes that achy feeling. Also, it causes walkout. So your ear moving against that hard design pushes the earbud out. So, I mean, to your husband's point, it's a good business design, right? Because the purchase of those earbuds are every 6 months repurchasing. And then the last reason is the sound vibrations that come through that plastic design causes ear fatigue in the cartilage. So we have created an earbud that continually flexes with your ear as it moves. It has a damping effect. So the sound stopping that, and then the walkout is solved as well. So we really did this because the habits have changed. Like the earbud hasn't really changed in 14 years, except for wireless technology became stable enough for wireless earbuds, but the design is the same as what you're wearing right now. But the industry is growing crazy because of habits. So the habit has changed. So this is like an ideal business scenario where you choose an incredibly big market. This is a $32 billion market and it's expected to be $152 billion in the next few years.
Yeah. So the timing is perfect, but I also just wanted to add that in terms of the timing, yeah, I think especially as we become more of a digital learning society, people are hopping onto audible.com, and they're getting their books from, whether they're in the car, the subway, the airplane, whatever the mode of transportation is. And instead of just listening to like music videos, now it's like, well, they can pop in a book. And I think, and especially in today's knowledge economy, people like you spoke about before, that curiosity, it's like they want to know what else is out there. But for them to sit, for 2 hours, 3 hours plus, it's like, support me, marketplace, what else is out there?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
It's like the Levi's to the gold rush.
Yes, exactly. God, that's a good, I've never used that analogy, but yeah, that's exactly right.
You can borrow it if you'd like. Yeah.
But then Levi's, when they came out with the female brand, exploded, right? Like that is awesome, addressing the needs of the consumer.
Yes. So you also grew up very creative. Like I think you mentioned on prior podcasts, as well as in our preamble, both of your parents had an entrepreneurial spirit. They thought outside of the box.
Yeah.
So it was encouraged, was my impression.
Yeah. I mean, my dad's an entrepreneur, and he is, I mean, I'll have to say, like they say, I am dyslexic. And growing up, you always have to think outside the box. And part of so for what I've learned, and because I just had a kid diagnosed with dyslexia, I've been doing a ton of research, but part of that is that you just think totally different. So it's like you can see around corners. And that has been my sort of superpower, where I can see the future of things, but I can also see different paths to get there that are not traditional. For someone who's like an engineer, that our brains are going to drive people crazy, right? Because we're always thinking of new, different ways to approach things. So yeah, my dad was an entrepreneur. My mom is she's incredibly successful, but she was a civil servant. She worked for the city and county of Boulder, Colorado, and just was incredibly successful in that, especially at a time when women weren't leading those departments. And so I had both a female mentor who was incredibly successful, and then an entrepreneurial father who was, showed me you could do it and get it done.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that for a moment, because I think that encouragement, then it's kind of like, well, how did you end up here today as a founder of a company, and you've got pitch decks, and you've gone out there and got funding, and it's like, wow, how did this individual, male or female, how did they become so brave? And it's like, well, if we look at your upbringing, and it's like, if it was encouraged, if it was a part of the family culture, then that's kind of a hint to any of the parents out there that might be listening, that the culture does matter, and to encourage your children.
And I will say, I mean, and it's different now, which I'm so thankful for my son who was diagnosed with dyslexia, but part of being dyslexic growing up, when I grew up, was that I was constantly told I wasn't good enough. constantly, like, and that's not just a female thing. It was mostly around the dyslexia, and I was constantly made fun of. And there's an
That
element
either motivates someone or
exactly,
it
exactly.
or it breaks them down and learn helplessness. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so, but because I was I'm not afraid of being rejected, right? And I still had the confidence to understand potential and growth, right? Like, I always want to take in new information and learn as much as I can. But there's an element where you can tell me no 50 times, but if I see a clear path to growth, I will discount that, but I think it takes a lot of guts. If you're a entrepreneur, I'll say courage is one of the most important traits, like the courage to keep trying and keep failing and keep going. But they do say dyslexics are they're either successful CEO entrepreneurs, or they are white collar criminals. So you get to choose which way you're going to go.
Because they're seeing outside of the box.
Yeah, they're seeing outside the box. They can be super creative. They're tenacious. They have, but they're, generally one of the attributes is very, like, sort of bright. And that's how they can navigate around stuff.
That's wonderful. So I guess one of the ways that you had the ability to overcome it was your encouraging home environment, but also your internal determination that no matter how much people on the outside might have discounted you, you weren't going to discount yourself or your ideas, what you could bring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were there any positive role models or special people? Like, was there like the fourth grade teacher, or was it just like sheer perseverance?
Yeah. So, I mean, I went to high school. I went to a boarding school. It's called Brewster Academy. And I was able to just thrive in that environment. It was probably the only school in the country that understood people who have dyslexia and how they're really smart, but they're not traditional learners. And having that experience was incredibly important to me. So the headmaster at the time, David Smith, he was just my absolute champion, and I couldn't have done it without him. And then later in life, my mentor and my father-in-law, who was he was really the only person I knew that was in business and knew exactly, sort of what I was going through. I mean, my dad, but he was in a totally different sector. And he was so helpful in helping guide me and give me the courage to do this business that I couldn't have done it without them. And then my husband, he's just my rock. And if it was, there's plenty of days where I just want to, it's so hard and so taxing sometimes. And you're overcoming so much mentally, that some Fridays I'll just quit. I'm going to quit. Like, I announce I'm quitting. And my husband will just go with it and like, yeah, absolutely. You should, that's great news. And then we'll be out in public and he'll be like, my wife just quit her job. And so we're celebrating this weekend. And then on Sunday night, he'll be gently be like, so you're going to go back to work tomorrow?
He's your champion.
That's great. So he's just awesome. I couldn't do it without him.
That's wonderful. So just as designing a legacy comes with obstacles, I can also imagine that starting your own business comes with obstacles. So in addition to the dyslexia, what were some of the things you faced? Because I think people just don't know. They could look at the product and the packaging, but not understand the journey.
Yeah. It's funny. I just had a friend who's a founder text me, and she was like, did you understand how hard this was going to be when we started it? And she's incredibly successful. Right. And I was like, listen, what I love doing, I love business. I love everything about business. I love growing businesses. I've done it for, a number of other companies in the past. I'm so honored and excited and thrilled every day to grow my own business. But what I do say, I joke that it's like going from setback to setback with enthusiasm, right? It's so mentally challenging, and you always are having to pivot and find a new solution. Okay, that one doesn't work. Let's try this. Why don't we try this? Which is advantage of startups because you're very agile. But it is not for the faint of heart, right? There's plenty of sleepless nights. I heard an investor once say, you definitely sleep like a baby. Like every 2 hours you wake up crying.
Those are called the growing pains.
Yeah. That's exactly how babies sleep.
One of the things we also spoke about in our preamble before recording, when I shared a little bit about like the background of how I started in this business, I mentioned about failing forward fast, because it's more than just like, oh, if you build it, they will come. You have
Yeah.
to really read the landscape well and be able to adapt, or you stop the connection, or you lose the connection with the customer or the client. And so if it's like a moving target, it's like fail forward fast. I'm still failing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's right. I mean, you do learn a lot. I mean, we've been very fortunate, and mostly I think because we did a ton of quantitative and qualitative research prior to this, but we've been very fortunate that we didn't have to really pivot um, our strategy. I mean, there's a lot of options for growth in the future, but we seem to have done a really good job on how we're approaching the market. But there's the failures come in like, you know, we had to scope things out, which you never want to do, right? Like it's so painful when you have such a clear vision of what should be on the market. But to your point, you got to get it out on the market. You've got to get it tested, no matter how much research, how much planning strategy you do, until it's in the consumer's hand, you don't really know. And so you do have to get it out. And that was a painful for me to do, but we did it and it worked out. You know, I'll say that. So all those people not just hesitating, like, oh, I could just do this one more thing. Just get it out there, have people test it.
Yeah. And I think you're also perseverant when it comes to raising capital. I know sometimes women aren't the number one leader statistically in receiving capital, whether it's venture capitalists, angel investors. And so I can only imagine if you're like in a room and you're like, I got to speak into this pitch deck right now. And there are going to be days you feel like it, probably days where you're like, I just don't want to get up there and pitch.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of data out there. If you're a female founder, you know, you obviously you can always reach me on LinkedIn. I'd love to help, but there is a lot of data out there. I mean, the sort of rough stats are 1.7% of VC-backed companies are led by women only, but 38% of successful exits happen by female-led companies. So that's a numbers game, right? So that means if you're talking to a VC, just talk to them about like the chances of you succeeding is way more successful with a female founder, right? So if we're going to generalize against women, there is, I mean, there's definitely, you know, this when you're pitching to investors who are 90% male, they're always asking you down round questions. They're asking you negative questions versus the same pitch by a male. They'll ask, well, how much are you going to succeed here? How is this opportunity going to make us a ton of money, rather than asking them the down round question. So you just need to know going into it how to address those questions. The other thing is that, you know, in the headphone space or consumer electronic, generally the raises are like 25 million to 70 million pre-revenue. And we raised a tiny amount. We invented, launched, patented, built a brand, and executed a product that people are completely excited about with 1.7 million. And so you know, I don't know which is right. I'm really glad I did that because again, I needed to validate the product, the offering, to validate the market, whether or not I could sell against big brands, and how I can address this go-to-market strategy so that we can cut through the clutter before I took big money in, so that I knew I could do it right. So now we're raising a capital round and I know like we're going to go big here. And it's really exciting. But I also was very cautious about what I did. And because we had less money, it took us longer. Right.
Which might also be good because you get to like deal with all like the bumps now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true.
And
Yeah.
it's also fascinating when the customer speaks to you. Like I know a lot of times with like social media and direct marketing, it's like you put it out there. And I think you made like an offer. It was like, buy these earphones, and then you refunded the money, but you saw that the demand was there and
Yeah.
just like listening. And it's, yeah. I thought that was a brilliant strategy.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely we talked about this earlier, but you definitely want to make sure that consumers are willing to pay for it. And then once they have it, they're excited. But we did a ton of buys prior, like media purchase. buys prior to this to make sure that the messaging was right, the product is right, the people are excited about the product, the value proposition is there. And then we would return the money. And we've done that for both our headphone, and we're also building a productivity SaaS platform on the hardware. And we've done that for that and tested different price points. And then we were like, return their money, of course. And like, hey, sorry, we can't deliver. But gave us a lot of confidence to continue to move forward, because we spent a lot of money and time on the business, and we just wanted to make sure what we had was real.
Yeah, and I see your cat's about ready to join you. And I'm going to bring up the topic of Apple in a moment, but I know that you were at a fork in the road for a moment. Do you go back to school and earn a PhD in economics, or do you start a business and dive deep into business seed capital? So I just wondered, like, what went into that decision-making process? Because, yeah, do you play it safe, and is it safe?
Yeah. No. So I wanted to do something different, right, than what I was doing. I had an incredible career, but I was ready to sort of do my next thing. I love research and economics and so forth. And so going back and getting my PhD in economics was a huge incentive for me. And I still might one day when, once Buderflys exits, but I sat my husband down like he was my board and I presented the business plan for Buderflys. And then I presented the case for the PhD. And he essentially was like, listen, we're paying for your last your last master's degree. Why don't you start Buderflys? Because you've always been doing that for other companies for so long, like you can do it for yourself. And I was so thankful for that. But he did, like a year and a half later, was like, okay, so I really shot myself in the foot for that one, because this one's way more expensive. Right. So, but that's how I sort of went through it. But I do think I think it was Jeff Bezos has said, when you die, if you are at a fork in the road, what is the regret? Which regret will you regret least? Right. And so always go with like, I will never regret starting my own company, because it is such a cool experience to grow a business and delight customers. And so that's sort of why I made that choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's wonderful. Yeah. Speaking about regrets, it's like you either carpe diem and you jump.
Yeah, exactly.
And you always hope you look enough before you leap. But a part of
Right.
failing forward fast is sometimes you just don't know what to see in the landscape.
Yes. Yeah. And you have to sort of navigate. Like a lot of times I'm telling my team, like, listen, we're inventing something that doesn't exist in the world. Like, there's no path. Like it's just like raising kids. Like there's no like book. I mean, I guess there's a lot of books, but there's not a manual that says do this and do that. Right. And so, you're taking a leap of faith every day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Although they say if somebody has a pet, like a dog or a cat, that's like practice for having kids. And I think for the entrepreneur, if they can have like that lemonade stand, it's like the introductory, like income and expenses. We've got sugar and lemons in.
Right. Yeah, I think that's good.
So speaking of entrepreneurship, let me bring up the fact that you are bringing a product to market and it's helping the listeners. And, one of the things we talked about also, it's, I thought to myself, well, why didn't Apple do this? Why is Tim Cook leaving money on the table? Yeah.
I mean, so that's the thing, especially in the US. I think any category is up for grabs as long as there's a new habit and a new way of doing things in the space. And there is this sense where like, oh, they have so much money, they could just pivot on a dime. But no, I mean, there's you guys, all of you who've worked for big companies, you understand, like, it's so hard to move the needle or change a strategy that's been in place for 18 months. And that is exactly why those big brands are buying smaller entrepreneurial companies, because they don't have the time to invent like we are, right? Or
fascinating. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought to myself, well, they have innovation teams and they pay them top dollar, and their vision statement, and mission statement talk about innovation.
True. I mean, but it's still to shift a strategy. I mean, we are getting the products we get are a year old, right? And the products that Europe gets are 2 years old from Apple. So that's been in the works for years and years. So there is an element where we have to move fast and grab market share. But you think about it, like Allbirds, they entered an incredibly crowded market with a huge brands that had huge marketing dollars like Nike and Reebok and Vans even, right? And they entered this market with an ugly wool shoe, right? But they did it. And there's time and time and again, there's these stories where even if it's a big crowded space, and that's actually what I like the most, a big crowded space, like think about Spotify came into a market where they were dominated by the music labels and the album sales, and the music companies wanted nothing to do with them because they don't make as much money off of streaming, right? But they came in, they were very strategic about it and addressing a consumer need, which they identified from Napster. Like it wasn't mind-blowingly different, right? So yeah, I mean, that's why I had the confidence. Like the other thing is while this is a huge market, Apple only of the headphones, earbuds only owns 34% of the market. So Samsung owns 12 is the next biggest. There is a ton of room. So even if we had 1% of this $32 billion market today, we would be in a good spot.
Yeah. But I was also like curious about like, was it Beats by Dre? They got those earphones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And why didn't they think of this? Maybe you have to invite Dr. Dre for some powder, right? Going down the ski slopes of Denver.
I mean, this is interesting. I was talking to one of the head of headphones at one of the big brands, like, you know, Sony, Philips, those guys type brands, Samsung. He was saying to me that they spent millions upon millions of dollars. Every earbud company in the world knows this is its biggest issue. And they also mentioned that they're comfortable in all their ads, but they're all exactly the same. And he was like, we spent 10 years inventing this, trying to find a solution to this and never cracked the nut. You guys have cracked the nut, and it is the golden ticket to the market because it's a consumer facing problem. Like you're not talking about the crazy big sound you're hearing in your ear because consumers don't understand those details, right? But what they do know is that they hurt after a while wearing them. And he's like, you've cracked the golden, I mean, this is the golden ticket to the space, and I can't believe you've done it from outside the industry. But that's where it all comes. Innovation and disruption comes from outside the industry. Like you think about Lyft and Uber or Airbnb, like that. Neither of those industries, taxi space or the hospitality space, ever thought they would get upseated by a startup, right?
Yeah, but I think Kim Kardashian is out there promoting Beats by Dre, so she needs to get onto your product line.
Yeah. I mean, it's a brand. Beats by Dre is not an awesome product. It's a brand though, right? So it's putting it on all like sexy artists, but they're so focused on that space and that it's become like a fashion statement, but their mechanics are not, you know, there's nothing special there, right? So
I think it'd be sexier for Kim Kardashian to be wearing the butterflies.
Exactly. I totally agree, but I don't have the same kind of money to pay her for it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, one day she'll hear about your product and maybe through Chris.
We've actually had some pretty exciting. Yeah.
So wonderful. So since this is a legacy podcast, what would you like your legacy to be? Or, you know, tell me about how you see this word.
So for me, altruistically, like I believe wholeheartedly that getting different perspectives and learning from different voices and understanding what different backgrounds and education and cultures can do for the world, that to get these earbuds to as many people as possible so that they can feed that curiosity and learn from different voices is where our why comes from. And that's what motivates us every day. So we are unapologetically not about music. When we did a deep dive into this space, earbud users, while they love music, they are not listening to music on their earbuds, but they're listening to audiobooks, they're listening to podcasts, streaming video, phone calls. And so we call this the spoken word vertical. And it's why I care so much about this. On a personal level, I have 3 little boys, as I mentioned, and to have them have a mother who is willing to take risk and succeed in business in a male-dominated world, it's just really important for me, that they grow up knowing that there's no difference between their, you know, sort of dad and me in that regard. So And then I've had incredible females who have worked for me. And for them to see like, okay, she can do this, and so can I. That would be the coolest outcome I could have.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I repeat on this podcast is about positive role models, because it's one thing to say it, but it's a whole other thing if you can watch somebody do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that modeling, it's like, okay, but Shea could tie her shoe. Shea
Yeah.
could enter the boardroom. Shea
Yeah.
could get that patent.
Yes. Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. And so the word legacy, what does that mean to you?
You know, we talked about this earlier. Like, again, I feel like a little bit like, oh, who am I to have a legacy, right? But there is that element where I'm like, I want to show all those aspiring entrepreneurs out there who are male and female, but that you can do it. Like, it takes a lot of guts, and it takes a lot of persistence, and it takes a lot of courage. And it's really hard. You'll work harder than you've ever worked before, but that's what grows a company. And that's where success comes in. I guess that would be really good. And I guess if I left it that my boys were like, anyone can do anything and have the courage to do that, as long as you are methodical and persistent and strategic about it. I think that would be important to me, which is not that profound, I feel like, but that's how
I
I
think
feel.
it's very profound. And I think in those nuances, new changes can happen, such as, for instance, maybe they'll date and marry a woman one day, and they'll be more likely to encourage her and support her, because now they've got a reference point that women
Yes,
can do more than just be demure, supportive, and helpful. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
yes, exactly. Yes, and that's really important point. Both are fine. Both, whatever you choose, yeah, that's fine, right? Like, it shouldn't be that all women need to be successful entrepreneurs. Like, I have plenty of incredibly brilliant friends who are stay at home, and what they're doing for their family is incredible, right? And that, I support them just as much as I support my fellow entrepreneurs, because the world needs all that different thinking and all those different approaches to the world to go around.
Yeah, lovely. And so one day, let's say Buderflys does really well. And I did joke with my husband, I'm like, what if I'm interviewing like the future Steve Jobs in female form? you know, to- right? Yeah. So what if you could do something one day with your money? Is there any other like childhood dream that you've kind of had on your bucket list?
Yes. I mean, we talk about innovation, and one of the most brilliant innovations of all time was the discovery of plastic and how it changed the world and e-commerce and logistics and so forth. I would do anything to find a solution to the plastic problem, because I really care about what it's doing for the microplastics in the air, for the ocean, how it's, what it's doing for even plastic takes so much petroleum to produce. So yeah, that will be my next venture if I don't go back and get my PhD. I'll do both. They'll both focused.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. There was a documentary I saw recently, and it talked about all the brand new plastic factories that are about to be built across the United States,
Yeah, I know.
from
I'm
Pennsylvania to, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so there was a huge issue with that freeze that happened in Texas last year, or was it 2 years ago? That they are one of the biggest oil producers for plastics and petroleum producers, and that freeze caused a lot of plastic to go on delay. So that, when you talk about supply chain, that was like one of the issues, which had nothing to do with COVID. It's just a freeze.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm aware of those, and I'll move on to the next question in a moment, but I'm aware of those plastic companies and the factories, because they push out all those microbeads into the Gulf of Mexico.
Right. It's heartbreaking. So yes, that's my next.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. So on one hand, plastics is very useful, but I don't know if they really thought through it long term for humanity's sake.
Yeah, I mean, same with the combustible engine, right? Like, that was a mind-blowing invention. And now we're doing everything we can to get rid of it so that we're not breaking down the ozone layer. So
Yeah.
and
Any
you
of
have to be careful of what you do with inventions.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about, kind of going up against the big companies like Apple before I ask you about your values and principles? Any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're not going up against those guys.
Okay.
They have either neglected or overlooked an incredibly important aspect of the earbud to them. And that because they are growing so big and so fast and they have such great margins that they don't think they need to change, right? And so we are just addressing the pain points of the area where they've overlooked it, and going all in on those that consumer pain and delivering this pain point for them. So no, it's not, to me, that's not an issue. I mean, I know people are like, what cojones, but it's the same as the Allbirds going after Nike, and it's the same as Lyft going after the, sort of gangster taxi industry.
Okay, good. I didn't know if it may have taken market share or whatnot. So cool. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, no, I mean, we need 1% market share and we'll be $1 billion company. So
Okay.
it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, that's all. I mean, like, and there's always room, right? That's why I think every category is up for grabs.
Cool. So what core values or principles do you get to honor by designing your legacy? And I would say this even sooner than later, because some people put it off, and then they could be like the final year of their life. But what values do you think you get to honor by kind of embracing personal agency today in thinking about your legacy and even building this company compared to if you had taken the path of least resistance?
So we have our core values for the company that I think have helped us a ton in guiding our strategy along the way. I mean, for me, that being curious minded and open minded to different thought perspectives, ways of thinking, that is the most important thing you can do. Like, there's this comfortness in sameness, right? But the more you bring in people who have different backgrounds, different cultural experiences, different ways of thinking, the better either your company is going to be, the better your mind is going to be, the better it is for raising children. And so that core value and having that curiosity to learn from others, I think is incredibly important, and honestly why we built the whole company. So that would be mine.
Very cool. So I'm hearing innovation, open-mindedness, diversity of thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And maybe a little bit of determination sprinkled in there.
Yeah. I guess like that's the thing. They say a lot of, the stat off the top of my head, but it's some significant number of startups fail. I think mostly because people can't keep going because it's so hard. It's not because they have terrible ideas, right? Or they have terrible business plans or whatever it is. It's just because it's so much work. So persistence is part of the deal, and like, just keep trying, keep believing in what you're doing while learning new things,
There's an expression in business. I'm going to amend it slightly. It's last man standing or last woman standing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to keep standing and keep standing. And yeah.
I mean, one of the things, like that quote from Theodore Roosevelt, "The man in the arena," which way we should motivate women in the
can you
arena.
speak into it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't quote it verbatim, but essentially it's like, yeah, you're going to have all the critics in the world who are in the stands and criticizing you, right? But it's the man in the arena that matters the most. They're the ones that tried. They're the ones that are not going to regret, or women standing in the arena, who are not going to regret starting something because they tried. But it's all those critics that you got to sort of shut that down, right? And even that little voice in your head, shut that down.
Yes, very much so. Any final thoughts about legacy or your company, what's possible, or a call to action to any listener?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys are thinking about starting a business, like, I don't know much about creativity outside of that, but feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn at Shea Gerhardt. And then, I don't know, I mean, just keep trying, like, and also get your idea to market, get it into people's hands, have them try it if that's what you're after. And that gives you a ton of insight, and then learn from there and grow.
Lovely. Okay. And your website is buderflys.com, spelled BUDERFLYS.com.
Yes. So we say 1D, like
Okay.
earbud, and no T's.
Oh, Buderflys.
Yeah. Just 1D, no T's, like earbud.
Cool. Oh, now I get it. Okay. Butterflies.
Yeah.
Ah, very cool. I'm going to just read my closing paragraph before we exit. And so, in closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder of To Legacy Planning, a boutique coaching and advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, USA, but international in those I advise. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content of this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you for joining us today. And if you're listening on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, to rate and review. So thank you so much for joining this week. And thank you, Shea, so much for speaking into what's possible when somebody brings their ideas to market in the business world.
Well, thank you, Angela. I really appreciate what you're doing for the world too. So thank you.